So, guys, welcome back for Space. This space today will be discussing multiple aspects of the ongoing both COPE, extremely good PR, and generally the misunderstanding from non-military people of the military situation in Ukraine. I already made a space about how the dooming was coming in two different aspects. On one aspect, you had the Russian dooming about, oh my God, we're losing a lot of equipment, which, as I said, once analyzed, that equipment is not beyond what they've had lost all the year 2023. So that ratio is stable, even going a bit down, despite the outlier at Avdiivka. But that's something else. And Avdiivka is actually, and I already made my point over there, is how any mass maneuver is going to work for the Russians on strong points and on elongated front lines. However, next to Avdiivka, we have what happened recently to Solotkoe, apparently the 30th of January, which, as shown by the Ukrainians in a little bit more than 3 hours and something, actually showed the loss of more or less 10 to 11 vehicles. Most of them were first hit by FPVs. Couple of them weren't taken out right away. The tanks continued to the major tree line. The push was over 3 kilometers. The objectives, as I already made a thread about, were roughly, I'd say, roughly 8 kilometers from there, and they were regarding the roadway from Ugledar up north towards I think the Konstantinovka, Mikhailovka, and so on. The attempt was smart. Apparently, it followed a preparation of the area. Actually, Ukrainians have already pointed out the preparation at the line to Mikhailovka, but also beyond it towards the highway. Why is suddenly an outcry about FPVs? I mean, FPVs literally are grinding the Avdiivka operation. I'm going to speak also about Avdiivka operation and why the calls for some so-called military reporters are stupid. And it is going to be something else. And I know it's going to think like sunk cost fallacy, but if you stay with me to the end, I will show you that indeed is not going. Avdiivka is not sunk cost fallacy, and that it's literally based on the Bahmut Soledar example, and this is exactly that. But let's go on with the attack to Solotkoe. It apparently crossed over 3 kilometers from the next Russian positions and reached I'd say, halfway tree line, although it's not exactly halfway, but let's say halfway tree line. And then after the first FPVs hit the Russians in a field where apparently there were no mines. So once again, when you think what the fuck happened, well, the fact is that apparently intelligence right there and the preparation work were correct enough because the field wasn't mined, and the Russians found a hole. Now, it went wrong? Sure. Once again, that's the first thing I said. Complete utter failure, but with a hefty price tag on the map. And initially, Ukrainians didn't say that it was in Solotkoe. What they say is that areas of Mikhailovka. The problem is that it's not going towards Mikhailovka. If, once again, and I will repost my short couple of tweets over it, the target's clearly the 00532, and it's to sever that communication road between North Ugledar, East Ugledar, and then towards the east, towards Nova Mikhailovka, Konstantinovka, and so on. So this problem here is the following. For once, Russians, not for once, but in this case, for once, Russians did something extremely smart. They also found a gap, and the Ukrainians are playing the exact same game that Russians were playing for a while around Robotyne, which is basically area interdiction. It's not occupying every field, every trench line. It's literally interdicting mass advances via mechanized assets by using FPVs, ATGMs, helicopters, whatever you want. Now, this couple of well-known military correspondents are saying it's madness. How can you, the 30th of December 2024, not take account of FPVs? And I'm like, how are you going to take account for them? I'm going to provide you 5 different examples. First of all, the very first attack to Avdiivka. We saw post-combat that a lot of these tanks were equipped with jammers. The spearhead was equipped to the brim with jammers. And the 110th themselves and the 53rd themselves said that they lost a huge amount of surveillance drones, so DJI's hotels, but also FPVs that didn't manage to reach the tanks. However, because they had that many FPVs at hand, plus artillery, plus javelins and shit, it literally didn't make any difference because the lines of departure from the Russian side, and this is the staging point, towards the line of contact, it's that far that it allows them to be reactive enough to get you. On top of it, they conduct surveillance every time. So, first of all, they're going to know when you assemble most of your troops, more or less. Second of all, they're going to see you put yourself in formation, and then they're going to meet you at the line or before the line. And this happened to the Ukrainians themselves. So, for the Russian side to be surprised that this happens is stupid. We are on when it comes to that type of warfare, we are in a complete parity right now. The only way to defeat this parity is to use more FPVs and attack the Ukrainians on the defensive positions on top of artillery, on top of striking UAVs, and on top of glide bombs. Plus missile artillery, doesn't matter, but it's just saturation of means. What was needed is exactly what happened in Novomikhalovka, or in Solodka in this case. The first defense line, which was 1 kilometer from the point of departure from the Russian side, was completely empty. And I'm telling you, just check the usual suspects. Go to Tatarigemi. He has a complete visual about the Novomikhalovka area. That thing was plowed. The first line of defense from Ukrainian side was completely plowed. It's a fucking lunar landscape. That's how they got them out of position. And this thing can be done multiple times. The problem is, with the FPVs, with non-line of sight assets, like the drones, like FPVs, like Baba Yagas, you don't need to be there physically. You are not occupying the area, but you are playing interdiction area. Once again, it's exactly what the Russians did in Zaporizhzhia. Exactly what happened in Robotyne for a while. And the only possibility to overcome this, first of all, is not enough FPVs and hit the FPV location, so you had to locate them. But it will matter. It will not matter, as I said, because finally you have 5-6 operators, each with 5-6 drones, and the only way to save your attack is that the first or second wave of drones do not hit. So they have to engage another wave and fly them into the direction. And because they take precautions, it can take up to 5 minutes to come there. And in 5 minutes with your tank, you will be 1 or 2 kilometers beyond the first contact point, which is you would have overrun the line of defense that you need to attack, and you would advance. But the FPVs are still going to come to you. And the jammers per se, I'm going to take the example of Krinky. Madjar himself said that he had a problem with one specific jammer-equipped BTR. They tried 5 times, and at the end, one managed to go there. And of course, the BTR was abandoned because, for whatever reason, the crew panicked. Whatever you want to call it. Same thing for a specific T-80 BV tank on the Russian side, a T-70 72B3. I posted the footage. the tank is moving, attempts to hit him happen, and out of the 6 FPVs sent to him, only one reaches on the right sponsoon. The tank has a slight fire on its self-sealing fuel compartment, but it still is going on. So the thing, as I'm saying, is that jammers, for as long as the other side would have enough drones to hit you, will not matter. Even if you get to the point that you need to assault, then you need to defend against FPVs attacking you on a stationary position or a very short maneuvering space. And sometimes that's how the Russians do it. They let the Ukrainian counteroffensive or attack or push happen. Ukrainians then stop for a point to orient themselves, and Russians FPV come there. Just check most of the pseudo-plateau vehicle attacks of heavy armor. All this armor is there checking where they need to go. They are orienting themselves. So why this space? It's called very specifically objective task purpose result. Beware of the cave myth. The cave myth, if you know what it is basically a philosophical object of people who are getting enlightened. But initially, what they're seeing is basically shadows of a action that happens behind them. So basically, what they have is something that forms a reality for them, but is absolutely not a reality because they're not awakened. They don't walk to what's going on. And the Novo-Mikhailovka front is exactly that case. It's one of the fronts that has silently progressed the most for the Russians. And it has been done so with less losses than Avdiivka, and creates a lot more disruption for the Ukrainian side. And that's why I'm here to tell you guys, beware of the Ukrainian PR. Be honest with ourselves. Do not start this whole bullshit like the most of military correspondents on the Russian side are doing right now, which is, oh my god, FPVs, FPVs, FPVs. On top of it, this is very nicely played. If you guys saw recently, the guy who's responsible for the um, overarching structure of military production, Kamishin, allegedly made a post over the objectives of the FPV strikes on the Ukrainian side compared to the Russian side. And this is said that, yeah, Ukrainians are smarter, they attack vehicles, attack troops, and very little trenches. Actually, this is the very, very true logic of the cave myth. You are seeing something, but there is a significant logic behind that. First part of the logic is that, unfortunately, not all FPVs were taken into account, but that's something completely different. The second part is that you can see on that small template over 500 FPVs attacking trenches. This should already tell you that there is a difference in posture here. The Ukrainians sit in trenches, they need to be dislodged out of there. And what the Russians are doing there, employing FPVs on those trenches, is actually smart. They're not wasting artillery. The same way Ukrainians are not wasting artillery rounds to try and thwart Russian armored assault. That's the logic here. However, this is taken as a kind of inability, and Karlin literally started with this thing, that inability of the Russians to foresee and use them for something else. It's not true. The guys who non-stop used FPVs against vehicles this summer was Bober. They literally stopped the first wave of assault by FPVs. We had fun with those images. We are not having fun now. And it's logical. The Russian posture is assault, is attack. The Russians have the initiative. They are completely uncovered. They need to advance. And the problem with the FPV is, once again, it's not overlooked, but unfortunately, for some reason, the Russians do not have this mindset that Ukrainians seem to show for certain tasks, which is they have an objective. Objective is, in this case, hit a specific point, specific radar, whatever. Which is the task? Task is to be able to see it and strike it. Purpose of it: destroy element Y to open opportunity Z. And the result is it is done or not. The Russians so far have this approach on a completely different aspect, and it is hunting artillery assets on the Ukrainian side. We have spoken about this. It's clearly autistic. But on the same time, the task for the FPV crews now is to hit everything that would hinder Russian advance. So you will have to hit trenches. You will have to hit infantry, because that's also what the Ukrainian side has to offer right now. They are defending. Most of the defense assets is going to be artillery behind the lines, maybe some armor to actually compensate for the lack of artillery due to losses, and also to the fact that if they show it, they're going to get it hit. And also FPVs. And the guys who are using FPVs, we had like recently a small team of 3 people mounting an FPV getting killed on troop detection. I posted one of the images. Um, that's what it is. These guys are going to be in trenches. You cannot do it otherwise. On top of it, most of these people are choosing to do the last mile in small vehicles to be as stealthy as possible. Is there a range deficiency on the Russian side? I argue that yes, maybe there is a gap of 5 to 10 kilometers, and Russians are not using enough repeaters, although they could. But the reality is not the range deficiency. The reality is that the Russians need movement a lot more than Ukrainians because they're in the offense. I explained this in the summer. The moment you need to go to the offense, you need to supply a lot more because you're burning it. And in terms of artillery expenditure, you will need those trucks on the road. It doesn't matter. So the solution would be either completely armored trucks, but then you got the wheels, tracked artillery tractors, but it would be just the same. You will just have a behemoth of 20, 24 tons instead of the MTLBs that we have now, and still the trucks would be problematic. On top of it, the footprint of a tracked vehicle is going to lead these guys to your artillery. We had this with the Ukrainians using a man Cat or HX8 going to I think it was self-propelled artillery, getting it spotted, and the M109 got hit. So right now, the problem with the persistent local tactical and overarching ISR is not solved. And it will not be solved. The only way to solve it is to impede the guys to actually act on the intelligence. So basically, not allow them to hit you, but seeing you, it's given the shorter front lines now and the even more localized hot points, Avdiivka, Nova Mikhailovka, Terni, there is no element of surprise anymore. The only thing you're going to create is saturate the position and saturate the potential of that position to be covered by artillery. So hit behind it, take out the artillery covering that position, and then advance on it, hoping that you're not going to have FPVs coming to your face. This is exactly what happened to Nova Mikhailovka. This is exactly what has happened multiple times on Ukrainian charges recently. Or then you're gonna do something more different, which is trying to creep with infantry to this objective in this case, which is 5 kilometers, and that would take you weeks. The single push towards the highway connecting Ugledar to Konstantinovka yield you 3. And of course, it's the first push. And of course, this push was facilitated that most of the lines behind the first line of defense is a gray zone. And the Ukrainians themselves put themselves behind whatever because they were getting pummeled. Then the other point that I'm hearing, and I spoke about this with Dooming, is that Russian Dooming is a second nature, by the way, is now completely forgetting what happened in 2023. The people who are leveling out these accusations have forgotten that they were dishing it for half of the year in 2023, even more. They also forgotten that before 2023, this defense on depth was absolutely shot upon by everyone. Romanov was mocking the trenches. Northwind was mocking the lack of communication on the defense lines. A lot of people who today keep complaining, keep bitching, we're always bitching. Because war is not perfect. It's not. If it was perfect, one of both sides would be now either at their historical borders, which is the Russian side, or to their internationally recognized borders, which is the Ukrainian side. It hasn't happened. It's not like that. The war doesn't work the way you think. And I explained already, jamming is not foolproof. And even if it is working at some point, something gonna happen that is going to fuck up your jamming. Let's say one FPV goes close enough, explodes, takes out your wheel or your track, or hits something that blocks your turret, and your crew suddenly begins to panic. Unfortunately, this on the Russian side has been happening on Ukraine as well. But on the Russian side, sometimes the crews do not seem to evaluate properly the damage on their tanks. There was this FPV attack on a T-80BV around Avdiivka. The tank advances, the gunner and tank commander hit 2 more rounds, and then suddenly the gunner pops out, starts checking the damage. There is a small feint of smoke, probably because this is what happens most of the time with T-80s. There is a huge structural problem. You got your fuel sprucer going through to the right side of the turret, right at the level of the turret seam. So basically the contact between the turret and the hull at the turret ring. And it is when something penetrates there, it's gonna hit the inflammable liquid that serves the hydraulic liquid that serves to actually not stabilize, but to allow the turret to be driven and rotated. When that shit blows up, you got your fuel, which is basically, as this turbine is highly flammable, going through with the pole that is within the turret, barbecuing the crew, expanding itself all over the place, and causing a secondary detonation, which most of the time ends up with the tank being lost, be that a turret catapulting or whatever. So a lot of these guys now are afraid of losing their lives if that happens. Therefore, whatever is going on, whatever smoke is there, even if the smoke, even if the penetration is not complete, or there is no huge issue, they will fucking bail out the tank. And of course, this is a trust issue on your vehicle, but also very good knowledge of the other side, and they know because they have the same tanks. But once again, there was no need immediately. What the need was is to fucking take a extinguisher, go for whatever was burning, and then check it. These are also things that I'm sorry need to be actually repeated with the Russian tank force. It wasn't that bad a year ago. I'm sorry to say it. Some of these guys would stick with their guns. And this for a long while, despite whatever is said in Zvezda, has been ongoing. There have been good tanks lost for nothing. A BVM was lost because some asshole just fucking let the hatches open. The way the tank was immobilized, to me, sorry, it didn't seem that there was such a fucking hurry that you wouldn't even fucking clap your own hatch. Was it going to stop a heat or a EFP drone dropping something on top of it and burning? No, but you made it easier. These are ethical issues within training that both sides have been showing, and it's awful. We got Leopard 2A6's hatches full open, and people getting the fuck out. On a T-72, that may be excusable because the Russians both have a shit ton still remaining, so they can refurbish them, but they also produce their own tanks. The Ukrainians cannot afford that. They cannot afford to lose a Leopard 2A6 or STRV 122 just because something popped out of the vehicle. And of course, the logic is we're sitting ducks, like, let's get the fuck out of here. But most of the time, what they forget is that FPV that got your track or your engine is gonna get you next. So on this aspect, there are a lot of gaps in training on both sides and on trust on both sides on their vehicles. Um, of course, this is very easy for me to say this from the comfort of my living space, and I would like to go back to what I said. Yes, it's true. It's easy for someone who is not in harm's way to think like this. But once you actually see it done multiple times and nobody says anything to these crews on both sides, then you have a structural problem. And the structural problem, as I said, first of all, is a trust issue with the material that you have. Second of all, is a complete panicking once things do not go right. So there is no mechanic come back home plan, if you want. And I'm gonna tell it, it never occurred to me. So even when I was under the flag, I cannot say that I would have done anything different than these guys. It needs also to be said. But the problem is that at some point, when you see it multiply done, and you see that you lose very good kit out of small details, then you have a huge problem. Because however determined these guys are, because they put themselves in harm's way every single attack, both sides, at some point there is something that completely goes off, and they do not follow up with the principle they've set up upon themselves. And this is something that in this war is gonna keep going on and on and on and on and on and on and on, because we didn't start this war as a non-ending affair, but because it's a non-ending affair, people are like, yeah, live to die another day now. And the reverse logic of this is that a lot of people are also committing TWK on the Russian side. There are cases where, I don't know if you know, guys, but they are raiding trenches. So far, we've seen about 11 guys captured, and they've raided at least 6 trenches. So sorry, something happened there. And then back then you got exchanges, which is logical. You exchange yours with theirs. So, but I wanted to come to the jammer fallacy and to Avdiivka. First of all, a lot of these people are saying, you know, you need to drop the act, you need to do this, you need to do that. I'm like, guys, this doesn't work the way you think. We are so deep in Avdiivka, the situation is so tense for the Ukrainians, it's going to get worse and they're going to lose the city. But saying that now we should spare assets and people to get that city is going to result in the exact contrary of what you want. Sparing these guys, not sending them to assaults, and not pushing the Ukrainians, but letting them stabilize their lines within the city, is going to lead to exactly what happened with Bahmut, which was that the city was done for in March, but it lasted 2 more months because Wagner wanted to do their, oh my god, we respect our Zeks and we're not gonna send them to die. But at the end, by trying to minimize the losses, they took more time, they lost more people, and they allowed the Ukrainians to start employing new means of destruction, including mining whole buildings and denying them the capture once they were captured. This is like fucking starting to swim through a river and stopping in the middle because, oh, I'm not gonna get tired, I'm gonna otherwise I'm gonna drown. Fuck you, you are in the middle of that fucking river. If you stop swimming, you are gonna drown anyway. If Avdiivka is not taken, most of the positions that the Russians have right now are overextended. Except for a few of them that are in optimal positions, if Ukrainians decide to be stupid and put 50, 60, 70 assets and try to roll the Russians back from Krasnogorivka, they're gonna lose those 50, 60, but they're gonna take part of Krasnogorivka back. This is exactly what happened in Bahmut post 20th of May 2023. And it seems to me that these guys who are supposed to be war correspondents, who are there with the troops now for 2 years, they don't seem to realize this. They speak about nobody learning shit, but they don't learn apparently. And this is one of the things I want you guys to understand. Every time you hear this, you turn around and say, what's the alternative? How the fuck are you going to defend a field in the middle of nowhere next to Novomikhalovka? How the fuck are you going to defend yourself in the middle of Stepove where there is nothing anymore? Where are you going to fall back to the rail tracks? I'm repeating this over and over and over again. Everything is a continuum and everything is a momentum. Avdiivka is in a momentum. Ukrainians are not getting anything back from Avdiivka. Every single push that has been towards Avdiivka has not been pushed back, whatever they've said. Therefore, right now, even if there needs to be quote unquote an operational pause after Avdiivka, it needs to happen because then it would allow the Russians, first of all, to have the Ukrainians come from a lower ground and then return the courtesy of everything that was lost the last 3-4 months, instead of tapping out now, letting the Ukrainians fortify the city even more and using that city as a springboard for pushing them back beyond what they had when the operation started. And this is not me like dreaming some shit. It's literally what happened with Bahmut. Trying to reduce casualties midway, it's only going to give more time to the other side. And unfortunately, what people are saying is that, yeah, but then we should attack them with firepower. Why are you saying that on one side, the Ukrainians are not using their artillery, so they cannot reveal it, but the Russians should reveal it, therefore get hit and lose that advantage that they have on Avdiivka? The whole point of artillery is to exploit where you're moving on. The PR from the Ukrainian side has definitely won the war for them when it comes to how the Russians are seeing it. The principle of exploitation doesn't exist anymore in any fucking military correspondent at all. In some cases, it's even worse. It's like, oh yeah, they can hit that right properly. Wait when they're gonna come there. Yes, exactly. Wait when they're gonna come up there, because you're gonna hit them back. It seems to me once again that I have overestimated whatever the Russians were thinking militarily. I'm speaking about the correspondence here. I'm I'm like, this is one thing I said most of the time is like SITREP is a blind spot, and I had a fisticuff with Defense Politic Asia, who was speaking back in the day of defense is crumbling. By the way, um, I don't want to speak about that idiot, but we are where we are. Um, the situation here is that every single thing that you are seeing has a reverse side. In this case, most of the reverse sides, unfortunately for us, are either footage that shows, of course, the opposite, that Ukrainians are getting smashed, but most of the reverse side is to be found in Ukrainian obituaries. And it's unfortunate, I'm going to tell you guys, it's unfortunate that Russians do not emphasize the show of the killing as much as the Ukrainians do. Of course, Russia's going to show, they show a lot more that it was in 2022. And some are led to believe that, oh my God, the Russians are showing everything, but just they cannot kill as much as Ukrainians. I'm like, yeah, for sure, but then how can you explain to me the obituaries? How do these people die? No, the reality is that for a lot of the losses, we do not just see them on the Ukrainian side. On top of it, as I said, the Ukrainians do not need to have a similar absolute number of losses. They really need to have 5 times more, 10 times more. But this is not what we're seeing in the obits. This is not what we're seeing in the body exchange. This is also not what we're seeing in the prisoner of war exchange. Even the latest one was 195 to 207. More Ukrainians were exchanged than Russians. Uh, and this is the biggest problem. The Russians are using their militarily in a very military sense. So vehicles are going to be exposed, planes are going to be exposed, ships are going to be exposed. On the other side, the Ukrainians are maximizing only parts of a military. They do not use ships unless you want to call suicide crafts as ships. They are not using their aircraft the same way as the Russians are. Most of these strikes are few in between and used by very far away. So the level of damage there is well propagandized, it has to be said, but the ratios of damage that they get in return is far higher. What the PR game has been for the Ukrainians, and therefore I said they have won the PR war. Russia cannot win it back unless there is a full capitulation of Ukraine. They won the PR war because a couple of strikes in Crimea get super scrutinized and analyzed, and everybody's like, this should not happen. Why shouldn't it happen? Why did the West design these assets if it wasn't for penetration? Why, when the Russians are penetrating Western air system defenses, nobody's like asking themselves how this happens? Because this is the main issue here. The same results are achieved by both sides with the same kind of weapons, despite one side having a whole swath of its intelligence apparatus completely defended because it's outsourced. But nobody seems to actually see the irony of it. Once again, the cave myth. If you are going to analyze this war, you cannot start with a meme. You cannot say, oh, a country without a navy is hitting Russia's navy. What should we say? A country without the GDP is stopping the fucking naval shipping in the Red Sea? It's just how it works. It's an asset and a counter asset. Next, we're gonna hear that Ukraine without air force is gonna shoot down Russian planes. No, that's why you have air defenses for, and the employment of that air force from Russia can be lacunary. That's what they fucking did the whole 2022. They started to fly a lot with, and I posted a picture in the private group, with KH-29 TDs or whatever, and at some point it stopped because they were too close for comfort. The Ukrainians stabilized a certain interdiction line by pushing their troops forward, which was exactly what the Russians were doing for a while in Ukraine. And then there, where the Su-34s with KH-29s were almost safe, suddenly they weren't. This is once again how you should analyze the situation. Is Russia doing its utmost? No, they're still in a very attritional phase of the war, and they're trying to do this on the cheap. And yeah, a lot of people are gonna say, yeah, but the budget went $110 billion. Yes, it's true, but Russia's budget should have always been over $100 billion for its military. It should have. Why? Because then what happened between 2022 and 2023 would have would have not been happening. Russia took 6 months to first completely streamline its production apparatus to a far more production intensive structure, then needed to find a way to take in 300,000 to 400,000 mobilized people, weed them off, take them from their jobs as well, because these guys were mostly productive parts of the society. Try to find a way to reduce the loss from the tax pool. For a long while, the prisoners were the very safe and nice bet, because prisoners were only costing money, but they were useless. You just had these people in a cage doing nothing, eating. I'm not saying it was fucking Club Med, it's not that. But the prison is a coastal society anyway. So for a while, this was a very smart use of that resource. The problem is that there is a reason these guys were in jail. And the Russian society as a whole still considers these motherfuckers as trash. So freeing them, giving them a gun, putting them to fight for Russia in a good or worse situation would lead to these guys saying like, no, I want to go back to prison. Here I'm dying. There at least I was alive. And so a worsening of the conditions where these people were operating happened within Wagner or outside Wagner. Plus, these people, most of the time, were not the freshest in the society. Therefore, they were considered the way they were considered. Sometimes it was good. Some were liberated, then went back to their old habits, and we had a couple of murders by former Wagner convicts. But the same happened for Storm Z units. So that resource was problematic, even a little problematic, still problematic. But now you need to do something about how Russia is seeing itself in the war. So therefore, once again, the core of the problem being objective tax purpose result with the Russians is taking time. And this should never happen if the budget was properly foreseen for such a result. And you cannot tell me that Putin never thought about a explosive long-term war. There is no way if he did that then he must step down right away. What I think is that for some reason, choices were made too late. Some thoughts were delusional, and in my opinion, they still are when it comes to Ukraine. And the Ukrainians, for a large part, the first wave of mobilized were ideologicals. So they didn't give a fuck about how war should be done for as long as they could kill Russians. Unfortunately, as I said, those ideologicals have died off. So Ukraine right now has its own issues with mobilization, with its war economy, and so on. And no, it's not because the West is not giving money or weapons. No, it's because if you want 500,000 guys on the front line, you will need to take out 2 million people from what they're doing right now. Or 3. But I'm going for 2. Your manpower pool is already very, very low. Male and female, in total in Ukraine, you should be at around 15 million as a manpower pool. You're gonna take 2 million out of this on top of whatever was taken before and whatever fled Ukraine. I don't know if you guys understand what's going on, and that's why fucking Zelensky and everybody's going all crazy, and why right now the compromise for mobilization is a shitty system that Ukrainians are comparing to the Swiss one by saying, "Oh, this is going to be a reserve system." No, the Swiss system is a military service. So for 5 fucking months, depending on what you want to do, if you want to do a to do your service, so military service as a non-commissioned officer or a junior commissioned officer, you're gonna fucking suck for 6 months. For other tasks, it's 18 to 21 weeks. But this is 18 to 21 weeks of people that are not where they're supposed to be. They are compensated. There is something that is provided to them, but you are usable. Your military service for those 18 to 21 weeks puts you to fight. On top of it, let's say, as I said, that you need those 500,000, you would need at least 25,000 recruitment officers and training officers. What you can do, it's true, is do it gradually, but you're not going to earn anything from that. You can do it 50-50-50, and it will take you 10 batches of 50. That's something I spoke about when I was envisioning Russia's own mobilization post counteroffensive. But the Russians are doing that. They are doing batches because they can afford it. They can literally afford it to do it that way. First of all, they weird off the they warn off the Ukrainian counteroffensive. Then they launched their own offensive, and it's still piecemeal. It's not a large offensive. It's not 300, 400,000 guys going at once at it. No, it's literally small units. The first big unit was a double battalion attack on Avdiivka, and since then it has been companies and companies and companies and companies. This is the essence of attritional war on the Russian side. They know it's going to be like that. It's cynical, it's ugly, it's awful. But it's just going to wear the Ukrainians off this year, next year, in 2 years, in 3 years, in 4 years. That's why right now the Ukrainians, if they want to make a difference, and it's not about the weapons, once again, it's about how many fucking people can you put with a gun per square kilometer. That's it. Forget about super duper communication systems, weapons, and everything. When it comes to assault, next time that Ukraine is going to go to the assault, they're going to get FPV'd as shit. And I swear to God, right now, there are people that just want a pause to allow the Ukrainians to attack. This has been the main discussion for a while in January. There are areas where they want to stop it and let Ukrainians come through on open fields. mostly around Chasov Yar and Konstantinovka. So basically, the whole bullshit about Bogdanivka being a problem. But that will not change much. It's such a small area that Ukrainians are not stupid. What they're gonna do is just gonna hold what they have and get pummeled. They rather take it, take some losses, but not commit to a counteroffensive where they're not well equipped to do it. And therefore, you get Kirilo Budalo that says that, after spring, we're going to go to another counter. It's going to be the same thing. But this time, what they are going to think, in my opinion, is that the Air Force or whatever they're going to have extra is going to help out breach something, be that in Zaporozhye, be that in Donbass, whatever. This is ignoring the basics of the training within Ukrainian side. And this, we're going to go back to what I said about the Russians. Russians have forgotten why they are in such a position. They're in such a position because they got the resources, they got the people, they got the money, their own money. So that's our problem right here. The main problem is that on one side, there need to be a understanding of where we are at on the war effort on both sides, and on the other side, there needs to be an understanding from Russia and Russian people who are commenting on this war that there is no, right now, there is a parity on few means that puts this war in a lockdown. And the only way to go beyond that lockdown, for now, the only way is saturation, be that of counteroffensive means. So basically, if you want your tanks to survive each and every assault, then you need to equip them properly. So there we need to start looking like the Syrian tanks, circa 2015, 2016. There you will need to start equipping APS on almost every tank. You will need to fucking have multiple jammers, which are going to be draining your energy. Because that's the thing, electrification for these jammers need to be extremely high. You will need also a completely different form of preparation that you're doing right now in most Ukrainian positions, because it's fine. You're gonna get them out of the position and quote unquote occupied. But what with the next one? The whole point here is to have a continuous rollover, point after point. You cannot stop at one system and say, okay, you know what? We are there. It's gonna be fine, and we're gonna expect now the counteroffensive from the Ukrainian side. This vision of take, hold it, repel it, and then start moving back, it's not how it should work. It should work that once you are at the point A and you see the guys preparing to counterattack you, you should attack them while they're preparing or they're trying to counterattack, not fending the counterattack off. One of the things that has happened with both sides is that it has been working with this hold and secure aspect. And this is exactly what the Ukrainians completely forgo when they attacked Kupiansk. When they had the line, they not at a single point they started to secure. They spread panic on Russian lines. They completely penetrated them. They started to hold nodules, and they started hitting the Russians when they were coming back or moving forward. They didn't stop and stabilize Balaklia. Once they had Balaklia, they moved directly behind the uh, returning Russians. This has never happened since then. Every single time, every single maneuver, and I'm going to take the failed probe in March 2023 from Ukrainian side, they jumped the shark. They were at Novodanilovka, they had the drop on Robotine, and instead of keeping those positions, pounding the situation, forcing the Russians to go back, they went down slope. And they forgot that downslope was shallow, so there would be the perfect plateau for the Russians to counterattack them. and kill them off. These kind of mistakes have been the norm for both sides. And it's not, I cannot believe that everybody was a greenhorn. It seems to me that the war where we are right now, we need to accept its imperfections, consequence of what happened in 2022 for both sides. So when people go and die in Krinky, and Ukrainians are gloating that we destroyed this many trucks in Krinky because we're using FPVs, I'm like, yeah, but what's the follow-up? Follow-up is 10 dinghies, 5 guys each. One FPV hits one. Those 5 guys are drowning in the middle of Dnieper at minus 1-2 degrees outside and freezing temperatures in the water. Then these people try to creep into some hole around Krinky, get FPV dropped, whatever. A rotation comes. Those 2 get hit initially. Those 2 get destroyed, and then there is no staying power in Krinky. This is because they failed to their task to stop the Russians from retreating in good order without blowing the bridge. That's what the Russians did initially. They overran everybody and secured the Antonovsky Bridge. There was a small battle in there. We saw the videos, and the Russians dominated the Ukrainians. This, once again, I'm going to tell you, is how this war is right now. It's consequences of failures and successes of both sides in 2022. So stopping any kind of offensive on the Russian side and allow the Ukrainians to prepare themselves close to the front is a mistake. Is a mistake because it's going to cost the Russians a lot more in retrospective. And it doesn't matter what it looks like day to day, because we are seeing what both sides are willing to show us. And this is not to be, it's not to be taken as, okay, Russians are not showing, but they're destroying more. No, I'm not saying this. I'm saying both sides have their own PR requisites. The Ukrainians need to show they are dominating on the battlefield, never mind what the map is showing. And the Russians need to show they're advancing. So in both cases, the Russians are losing. It doesn't matter if you advance 3, 5, 10 kilometers when Ukrainians are showing that you lost 10 tanks. On the PR side, you lost 10 tanks. It doesn't matter if those 10 tanks that completely cut a road between one cardinal point and another cardinal point is true. It doesn't matter that you completely left flanked and you're going to move on to the southern Avdiivka. What they see is that, oh, you lost two BMPs to a specific points. You're not making progress. Russians have lost the PR war until now. The only possibility to get it back is, as I said, to get cities, to get points, to get boots on the ground, and to take over positions which, once you go at the map and shake it, you're like, oh shit, we have a problem here. And these things, unfortunately for the Russian side, would need a specific pedagogy which cannot be had. You cannot start discussing your goals openly, although they're visible, although they're obvious. You cannot start discussing them. That's not how the military works. Oh, you know what? We are going to point out to the that highway there because it's going to block both of them. But actually, this is going to be a feint for an attack up north to take the city. Nobody's going to tell you that. Okay, we can analyze it by seeing where the shit is going, but same thing for the protection. Nobody's gonna tell you that, oh, we right now we have this project about countering the whole drone war by doing this and that. You're not gonna hear about it. What's going to happen is exactly what happened to Ukrainians with the UMPKs. At the beginning, nobody spoke about it. After about 1 month of pounding, Ukrainians were forced to devise a plan to stop the pounding from happening. And most of the time, these plans have been a one-off tricks pulling Patriots or trying to shoot down the planes. We do not see systematic dropping of Su-35s. Despite everything that has been said, UMPKs keep flying. Russians just gonna change their angle, but you cannot keep your Patriot battery on the same spot, because then our friendly Lancets are gonna come for you. And we had the point with the Irish SLM not later than yesterday. And because Ukrainians are brain dead, of course they're gonna use mostly the same kind of positions. So once again, the problem right now is that the Russians simply cannot win the PR war, because it would entail explaining far more than what they need to explain to people. On top of it, because of a very strong parity in means on certain areas, there is no success for the Russians for as long as they're going to be on the assault discovered. However, when they are covered, and once again, the two tunneling operations in South Avdiivka show exactly that, there is no stopping them. Once again, it's not that they cannot fight, it's because they're exposed. Exposure leads to kills, leads to defeat of your plan, leads to casualties for both sides. Until the Russians are going to drop the posture, what they did last year in the month of June, you're not going to see a change in losses. You're not going to see a trend change. I hope they keep the threshold, which is less than 2023 so far, of losses. But that, again, would require people to understand Russians are attacking. They're going to take more losses. And this is the point. You got an objective, taking places, taking locations, putting themselves in a better position to negotiate, because obviously right now a complete takeover of Ukraine is not in the cards, unless, once again, I said, Ukrainians jump the shark, do this stupid 500,000 mobilization, go on the assault, get stalemated or get beaten back, and then you lost 500,000 guys. Killed, wounded, prisoners, unable to fight, a depletion of forces, whatever you want to call it. And then it's game over. Then indeed it's game over. It's not going to be a complete takeover of Ukraine once again. It's going to be a squeeze from the Russian side of Ukrainians and a frozen type of war, North-South Korea. This is why Zelensky is not doing it. This is why nobody wants to do it, because they're not sure those 500,000 you're going to put on the field are going to change anything. On top of the extreme damage it's going to do to the country. So once again, I'm going to repeat to you guys, we are in a very strange war right now where the Russians are advancing. Some advances look like nothing, but they're critical. Everything has its purpose. You shouldn't trust the plan at all, because the plan multiple times has gone haywire, but you should check everything that is being presented by both sides critically enough. And I said, the Solodkoye assault is an unmitigated disaster, because they kept themselves completely exposed. But that disaster comes in the heels of a very good operational plan. We can call it a trap if you want, but nobody's going to give you a 3.5 kilometer depth and call it a trap, especially, as I said, when you see the preparation. So the whole point here is the following. Whatever is out there, think about it critically, especially what the Russians say, but also try to see what's going on the map. What's going on the map for so far, for so long, is that Ukrainians are nowhere near to take back the initiative. They aren't. And the most important part right now is to see where exactly the current offense is going to lead. We are already in February 2024. Avdiivka is on the brink like it was like for the last 2 months, but it's not yielding. Russians are trying multiple pressure points for now 3 to 4 months. It has yielded some advantages, some pushes forward, and as our friend Kiki Budala said, this is going to keep going for now until the end of spring. So basically, until around the month of May, the Russians are going to push. We're going to have the same debate, discussion, so on. However, I'm not seeing any reformation of the Ukrainian military right now. They are keeping their assets, very good, no problem. But there is no reformation. We don't see new unit generation. In his latest podcast, Michael Kaufman, uh, said that the biggest problem with the Russians is that while they hadn't gained a lot in efficiency, I beg to disagree, but whatever, they were able to replace their losses and create new units. Remember, this was the bullshit that they peddled for the Ukrainian side non-stop. They said, "Oh, Ukrainians in 2022 did great. Their army grew and they had new units." Zelensky is saying that they have 880,000 people. This 88 shit with Ukraine it's bewildering, but whatever. Especially when it's a so-called Jewish president saying that. But most importantly, where are these people? You are supposed to have an army of almost 1 million people, but you are struggling to mobilize a rotation power. So once again, what's going on? Where are these guys? The reality is that Ukraine had very limited potential for mobilization. It completely exhausted it with the first wave. We had the call up paperwork from Zhytomyr in December 2022. There were already 300,000 people that were called in. We don't know where these people went. Then we had a second wave supposedly to happen in month of June with the creation of 3 reserve brigades. Then a couple of more brigades were supposed to be built. But so far, when it comes to the units themselves, we have 5 extra brigades created post counter. It could be even 10. It doesn't matter. That's 30,000 people in 8 months now. And that's less than what they had initially on schedule, which was 5,000 per month, 60,000 per year, trained capable units afforded by Western training. So once again, we have the same problem with Ukraine. They're winning the PR war, but once you check the sources, once you check the capability, once you see beyond the cave myth, yes, Russian losses are true, but yes, Ukrainian losses are also true. Ukrainian problems are also true. Not everything is as pastiche as, oh my god, we have only 4 elimination rounds to fire. That's not true. They have ammo to keep going for a while. And even with the upgrade of Western production capabilities, they will go to that 1.4 million in a way or another per year. The problem is that they will need to fire that shit with something. And that something is being destroyed. That something is undergoing Russian autism. And there is the only point that we should remember. At the end of the day, war is always going to be a proportional thing in this particular conflict because you got this lopsided comparison between the two. And that's why I'm telling you guys, whatever you are seeing, you're free to panic, you're free to be critical. I'm the first guy to be extremely critical. I already pointed out a couple of failed Russian advances and pointed out what stood out on both sides. I've already been, and people who know me on my circle know exactly that I'm very critical of some shortcomings that I'm seeing on Russian infantry, Russian mechanized infantry once under fire. On the other side, I explained that I think that because it's not a short term war, when you advance, push, are heroic, and you got the point, and you can hoist your flag at the end of 6 months, 1 year, you can always have this ethical, this non-self-preserving push. But now we are 2 years in the war. You're fighting for short distances. You're fighting for things that, on the hands-on approach, do not yield much, do not explain much. It's an attrition war. It's literally a meat grinder. So these guys are thinking to stay alive first and for all, and then maybe accomplish their goal. This is a self-defeating logic when it comes to uh, offensive operations, because trying to stay alive on the attack means that a lot of things are going to freeze you and expose you. And I already explained the attack south of Kamyansk. The guy, one vehicle gets hit by ID. Instead of pushing forward because the idea went off, if you go back, your vehicle is gonna get an ID or whatever. But that vehicle is already gone. You just can push behind it. I know it's very cynical. I know it looks like, okay, bro, this is Hollywood. No, every time this happens, you need to run to run behind the contact, not pull back. Because pulling back is just gonna give more space to whoever is attacking you to see where you're going. The closer you are, the less time he has to react. I know it feels very scholastic, but this is how it is. And if grown up, trained men are not doing it, there is a reason for that. And that I already explained. I absolutely do not judge them, but that's a mistake. The same thing is also to be seen with Ukrainians sometimes. So on that aspect, both sides are equal. They're equal for the FPVs. They're equal for the lack of electronic warfare issues. They are in exact parity when it comes to that. Only one side is attacking, the other is defending. So right now, unfortunately, the shoe is on the other foot. So we need to accept that, and we need to gain the most of the ground via those sacrifices. Because, as I said, at one point, some objectives are going to get reached, and then the focus is going to point out to those who haven't been reached, which means that Ukrainians, on the areas where the offensive is going to stop because it would have reached either a peak or the objectives that have been set out, are going to attack those points, because those points need to be fortified and sanctified from the Russian side. And therefore, there is when you're going to have less potential for an offensive. So you're going to go back and attack them to repel what was created. Russians try to do the same in Zaporizhia, and they're doing currently the same. They're Now that everything has been stopped, they are going to small counterattacks. This is warfare, guys. That's how it's going to happen. So once again, what is to be kept under wraps and literally um, solidified, controlled, and checked is not only what is shown, but what it means. And this is once again the cave myth. I said, it's okay. You can focus on losses, be dooming on losses, cry. I swear to God, I already have in my head exactly who is dooming and crying. and being a pussy. And this doesn't take out the mistakes that were probably made. But the point is that what is the solution? If you guys have a solution, please call the Ministry of Defense and say, I have the perfect foolproof plan to thwart FPV attacks. I'm sure they're going to take you in. They're going to be grateful to whatever you have to say. But it's just not doable right now because it's a mass problem, it's a spectrum problem, and also a human problem. Most of the time, the fault for a tank that fails is the guys in it that yield, that do something that goes out of the ordinary, out of the plan, or is out of what is supposed to be done. The abandonment of vehicles is exactly that. You just got hit by FPV. What's gonna happen if you take one extra more second to lock that fucking hatch, to just lower it? One vehicle that was hit on the Ukrainian side by FPVs is the perfect example. The guy abandoned, the gunner abandoned the turret, driver abandoned the hull, and the commander stood there for like 30 seconds to grab personal items. He didn't lock the hatch. He was there for his whatever it was, his gun, his vest, his jacket, whatever. He didn't close the hatch. He had the time to do it. He didn't do it. This is an ethical problem. And for one Ukrainian, you're going to find 10 Russians. I'm not saying that Ukrainians did that, Russians didn't do it. No, I'm saying both sides are doing the same. They're just abandoning ship without thinking what would it cost to them. A simple task. And yes, it's a rush. Yes, they are under threat. But it doesn't matter. One less second, one more second, the FPV is going to outrun you anyway. The guys who have avoided to be hit by FPVs, you can count them in a fucking hand. Your chances against an FPV right now are lesser than banging a top model. So, what the fuck? And this is, once again, as I said, these people are scared. These people have issues. And it's completely normal. It's normal. I said the war is becoming longer. Their point is to survive day after day because they got families, they got friends, they think still about the future. Compare that to the absolute no-brainers from Hamas. Those guys have no future. They know it. Therefore, despite every mistake, they are fighting like motherfucking monkeys. Russians did the same in Zaporozhye, and they're doing the same right now. But it's a different approach. It's a different thing. It is not here. I'm not here to say Russians should be completely oblivious to whatever and go full crazy. No, I'm saying something more specific, simple, whatever. They need to go back to the drawing board for a lot of crews, but also a lot of their trainees, and try and inspire them a way of going back to basics when shit hits the fan. And the Ukrainians even laughed about it. Once they get fucked, the Russians completely forget their military training. Motherfucker, you do worse. But it is also a truism, like once you get hit in the mouth, you forget your plan, you forget whatever, and you just try to survive, not to drown. And most of the time, when you try not to drown, as I said, that's where you make the biggest mistakes. And that's it. That was my point right now. It's just like whatever comes your way right now, victory, loss, huge breakout, um, complete defeat. Look at it. Don't cope. Don't deny it. Look at it. Look whatever it shows you and try to understand what happened. Do not react like a fucking moron like most of the things I've been reading for now, who focused on one point. And that point, most of the times, we don't have defenses against FPVs. Motherfucker, nobody has defenses against FPVs right now because of many, 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 many issues. So that was my point, guys. Um, that's it. Thank you very much for listening. If you have questions, come forward. If not, nobody. Okay. Just a couple of things, guys. In this thread, I'm gonna post a couple of maps. I already post them. Okay, General, up to you, man.
Hey, how you doing? I just listened to the last part of it, and you were talking about small man tactics, where mostly the offensive action is reduced, but probably it's just one of the two ways of doing it. Otherwise, the other one being a huge mass attack, like in Second World War, and nobody seems to have the political will to do it. I mean, anymore. At least on the Russian side, they don't want like to launch human wave attacks or whatever on large scale, as it was. So the Ukrainians maybe they are obliged to do that because they have no man anymore. So it's not possible for them. So and on the other side, the Russians are just like willing to do it, as you said, the attrition thing, and also not wanting to do it. And regarding the fourth generation and the industry capabilities. I think that they are focusing a lot on the production of armored vehicles, tanks, and new artillery. But probably now with the UMP case being the new thing, and being used every day in huge numbers. They need a lot more Su-34s. I mean, the Air Force has to be constantly on call, on station. Okay, launch here, go. And they simply are not having them in the air as much as they are needed, at least to dislodge people from these armored trenches and positions where the Ukrainians have built in their line of defense. And regarding artillery, if we speak in the past, the West had the 105 millimeter for many years, and the Russians were building better guns, probably the D-74 Type 60, how we called it, the 122 gun we had, which went to 24 kilometers. And then the West answered with I don't know, there are 155 pieces in the whatever iteration of M109, and the Soviets went building the MSTA and the Jacynt. Now everybody in the West and their mother is building the 52 caliber guns, and they have them. So probably the Russians need to invent something and push it to 54 or something, my friend. I don't know how this would be working, but seems to me that something needs to be done, at least to gain some quality advantage in this war. Thank you. I don't know what are your thoughts.
Well, my thoughts is that you are right to one point. Right now, that I have been focalizing on the classical advantage of it. Um, Most of it is being still, as you said, trying to have a offensive capability, so basically armored vehicles, mobile artillery, as well as FPVs, because as we said, we can see them in action on Russian side, Ukraine as well, but we can see them on Russian side. One thing that is being extremely wild right now is that I would have thought that Lancets would have been at 300 per month right now. It's very possible that they are used at that rate, but that Russians do not show everything. Right now, they're about 150 per month, with some that could fail or have unsuccessful or undistinguishable results. Let's say they are at 200. So basically, one fourth either do not do much, either do not attain the target or fail. Lancet right now, when it comes to that those qualitative advantages and everything, should have been at that level. So 400, 300, 500, because so far they are the only bomb-proof way of getting beyond 20, 30, 40 kilometers on the Russian side. Remember that we spoke about this roughly 4 months ago, and we said you gave them like 3 to 6 months, I gave them 9 months. We were supposed to see the new form of Lancet, which was networked and working as a swarm. This hasn't happened. What we've seen is self-detection of the Lancet and non-jammable um, contact programming. So basically, even if you try to jam the feed of the view from Lancet, the Lancet has its own programming. It's going to go to the target. On the other side, artillery-wise, we are seeing signs that the Russians have a lot of it. Uh, Multiple Ukrainians are using satellite views to also push their own narratives that we don't have artillery, guys. Give us some more. On the aspect, it's not that much ammunition. I've already explained. I think what Ukrainians are missing right now is a whole ecosystem to make their artillery more survivable, given what we're seeing from Lancets and counter battery fire. The other biggest issue, and this is something that we had seen in few cases, it's that Shahids are being now used both behind the lines, at the line, in between depth, operational depth, and front line. Two hits were in Mozhaisk recently. Two Geraniums hit like 20 kilometers from the front line beyond the Dnieper, taking out what looked like at least one deposit of ammunition or fuel. We have seen also Shahids hit between 5 and 15 kilometers in places where Ukrainian troops were stationed, or at least that's how it was explained. And usually it would show indeed as a dormitory or school or whatever. So that on that aspect, the Russians are ongoing with that problem. Um, what they need as a defensive plan, in my opinion, would be what they did early on in 2023, which saw them actually start targeting Ukrainian artillery assets. This should be done in a different way, not for artillery assets right now, but they should, and I'm going to go to the title of this space, the objective should be going after Ukrainian FPV crews. These FPV crews most of the time are going to be extremely visible because they are moving around with antennas, they are moving around with filters, they are moving around with the capability to both have longer reach but also be protected in case they get attacked. We had that with the Russians. We saw they were in a hardened structure when they got attacked. The Moses group on the Dnieper. With the Ukrainians, we're seeing something different. As I spoke about that picture about the small FPV crew that got killed. These guys are mostly trying still to operate the old way, small dugout, mostly putting those FPVs in the open and trying to do quick hit and runs, one or two FPVs, three FPVs, and then move out to another position. Therefore, that's where they got hit. They tried to install their FPV, and What I don't know what happened. Probably it looked like an airburst or whatever, but they were all killed in a very good, nice fashion. Uh, However, as I said, it seems that the objective task purpose result approach is more ingrained on the Ukrainian side, and the Ukrainians are far more systematic in trying to get those nitty gritty victories like this. Russia has, in my opinion, a far more empiric view on this war. Even if they don't succeed in having every single objective captured, they are working with a numbers game. So, as I said, if you check them up today compared to 4 months ago, it looks different. It puts the whole Ukraine line in a far more stressful position than it was. Is it sufficient to call that, uh, a achievement for 4 months? I would say no, but a lot of people will say not at all. There is always talk of the failure of the Russian uh, fall offensive. I'm like, you know, we're gonna see. The problem with the Russians is that, as I said, they're playing a numbers game. So of course they're gonna drop numbers on it. And let's go back to the artillery. The artillery right now, as I showed, or at least as the Russians showed, because I wasn't there. This was the most is the most important part. We need to be honest. I need to be honest. There was one hull number 13 during the tour of that Omsk facility. I counted 7 hulls for Msta S M2s. There was one large caliber barrel, so 152, that's the bore caliber, but the length caliber was obviously above the 49 uh, length that usually goes with the Mr. S. So there are two possibilities with that. First of all, the Russians have a intermediate solution. They already had it with the SM2s because the two A79 is a 60 L60 barrel. Those barrels were never ordered. Most of the barrels for the SM2s were actually EZ barrels, so basically L52s. The EZ was the study with an L52 that was made first for the M1, so basically the 155 millimeter version of the Mestas, which then, due to the frigating of the barrel, went to what we know as Koalicja. People who know the Koalicja project know that initially it was supposed to be a reciprocating breech and barrel, so basically two barrels with a reciprocating system. One barrel fires, the recoil charges the second barrel who fires. Second barrel fires, resets the whole breech to the spot. You need to reload both. This apparently situation was said to have been the problem of the Koalicja as it stood back then, because the reciprocating breach on the firing sequences made that actually you still had to stop. Instead of loading the barrel every single time once, you had to stop to load it twice. So of course you had the possibility to fire pam pam, so two shots in rapid sequence, but then you would lose 15 seconds minimum to reload both barrels, so the common breach. So if this one was dropped, and then you had the Koalicja SV that you have now, so the two S35 with a supposedly L60 barrel coming from the EZ work, but in the meantime you have the two A79 with the L60 barrel, which has been apparently chosen to be the intermediary solution until the Koalicja comes fully on there. And Shoigu recently was at the Ural Track facility and was told by the Ural Track guys, "We are sorry, dear minister, we are going to give to the military the first batch of Koalicias in February." Although, and Chun is here, being an asshole as usual, uh, told me that, oh my god, they were supposed to be produced in series and all that shit. Unfortunately, with Chuni loves finding arguments, but he doesn't like finding sources and checking properly the Russian military world. So yeah, it was impossible for MTOs to have delivered the guns for the first batch, given that the guns were ordered or approved for delivery in December 2023. So once again, the problem with the Russian military industrial complex right now is that it has the capabilities, it's going forward, it's just not this supernatural thing. It will take the same times as it takes for everybody for a discrete production. The Coaliția SV, even if it hits the stride, will never be able to be churning more than what is being churned out or planned to be churned out artillery wise by Omsk, which is roughly 120 to 240 maximum self-propelled 152 millimeter artillery per year. So in this case, um, the losses will be covered as it stands right now, but, and I repeat, but um, it doesn't mean that these guys are going to go back to Soviet times when they could literally dish out 800 system per factory per year. This is not going to work. And of course, we're completely far away from the Great Patriotic War numbers, whether we dish 2 to 3,000 type of artillery per month. But once again, those were different times, different systems, a lot less complex. So yeah, I hope generally that this was satisfactory to you.
Sorry, can I just say something?
Yeah, please, please, please.
Regarding the Lancets, yeah, I remember well that we were talking about the system reaching like the limit of its
Yeah,
usage. So it has been like a little evolution in it with self-targeting and the AI and everything. But probably, as you said, maybe they are starting to use those Shahid or whatever is the name in with a jet engine that, or maybe they are investing in their Harop style drone with
yep.
the delta wing they showed in some videos. So probably they are not shooting that much shahids because maybe they are trying to do more, or the capacities have been shifted to this other project that they think is better targeted to the camera and the jet engine and everything. Because yeah, as you said, I mean, that would have been possible to have a large number of Lancets, and the numbers are lesser. And the other thing regarding, I want to ask you about the T-80, since you're a tank man, so probably you're familiar with the whole history of the Omsk starting again to make it. Uh, do you know if they talk about new examples, or they are taking like refurbishment? Plan?
But the thing is that they were already doing refurbishment, and also not only ONS, but the 803rd Remont Zavod was doing that already. The problem with uh, the new production is that they cannot push it back for an indefinite time if they want to go to this attrition type of war. Why? Why? Because even though they can recover as much hulls and rebuild them and refurbish them, some glaring problems with the T-80 given the new realities of targeting. So the thing is that most of the tanks in the world right now were built according to a very specific um, template. It's a I did a whole space on this, but I'm gonna just review it. So a tank is mobility, firepower, protection. It should have the best compromise between the two while keeping it agile enough, light enough, and protected enough. That was the Soviet mentality. With the Western one, it was completely different in a certain sense, and they chose two different paths for the same kind of purpose. So you had the Leopard style IMX-30s, Leopards Type 74s, which were lightly armored, compared to their Soviet counterparts and other NATO counterparts, but they were supposed to be fast, nimble, agile, resist whatever infantry countermeasures on the first attempt, and then would be able to go beyond and then exploit the rear of the enemy. Those tanks in those 10, 10 metric tons protection per packs have been proven wrong all over the history of this conflict. So the only two Leopards that have been seen, one was taken out by a near miss by artillery, the other one was hit by lancet. So they're not going to be close to the front line in my opinion, any capacity if they don't want to see barbecue. The other possibility was the intermediary route, was the Soviets. So basically, a lot of armor at 180 degrees when it comes to the turret, and a lot of armor at roughly 75 degrees when it came to the hull. All the rest was rather less protected. So, for instance, the T-72, T-64, NT-80, NT-90 now have these 80 millimeter side hull protection, which is unfortunately without extra armor, be that non-reactive or reactive, is not survivable right now. Um, for the T-80, the biggest problem is also that because it uses a turbine engine, it can be multi-fuel, but it mostly uses far more flammable uh, fuel, which means that, as I said, there is this. Now we're seeing it a fatal flaw on the system. Now that it can be attacked from any angle at any point, despite the fact that the enemy is in front of you, the FPV can just circle around you and hit you on the back. So what was supposed to be a very specific situation, which was a flanking attack, now is the basic situation. You can be completely straightforward from your enemy, and still the enemy can hit you from the back. Um, so all the tanks right now are like that. They have been optimized for frontal attacks. They have been optimized for, when it comes to some Western tanks, for protection from deflagration of the ammunition with a seclusion, be that the Abrams, which has that 100 millimeter door or less, or the Leopard that has part of its ammunition behind this armored door. Therefore, for the T-80, every single one of these tanks to succeed, it can be produced the same as it was before, but then a solution must be found to this flow, which is basically your turret now on the back is completely less armored, but the back is a lot more accessible. The Russians have been starting to pull out a cage armor that goes perpendicular at roughly 1 meter from 50 centimeters from the tank's rear turret to up to 1 meter in a slant. I'm going to show you guys a picture from the attack I spoke about. The T-80 BV got attacked on the engine deck because the FPV could not get to the rear of the turret. There was no catastrophic explosion, but unfortunately it took out the engine, or something happened there and the guys abandoned the tank. So one of the things going to happen is that I already explained. Even if the Russians reproduce the T-80 on the same exact specs that I used to, it's just not, just not refurbishing, but new production. There would have to be a need to protect in a way or another, passively, actively, or electronically, the whole tank. The electronic protection on itself right now is, as I say, it's not foolproof. The active protection should be a panacea for a couple of hits between 4 and 6, but at the end, given the over presence of these FPVs, it doesn't matter. On top of it, the only real possibility for these tanks is to literally grow twice. Not because they're going to be, the chassis itself is going to have to be enlarged or widened, but because you will need to start putting those cages, as the Syrians were doing, at roughly 1 meter from each side, but your chassis is already only 3.3 to 3.6 meters wide. If you put skirts at 1 meter each, you're gonna have a almost 6 meter tanks. 6 meter wide tank, plus the superstructure on the turret. You need to also be sure about what you're gonna use, mostly because, as I said, um, you should not be blocking your driver from getting in and out in any kind of way. Of course, the driver on the Russian/Soviet tanks has a great advantage. He has a floor trap to go outside, but let's say that you hit a mine, floor trap in most of the cases is not going to be accessible for one main reason. That trap probably has been compromised by the explosion of the mine. On the other side, when it comes to the T80BV, if you guys know how the T80BV's autoloader is created and put there, it has 28 rounds when it's a full autoloader, but it completely secludes the driver from the rest of the tank because you have a row of ammunition standing there. In order to allow the uh, driver to communicate with the rest of the hull, most of the time the Russians would take out two cassettes. So instead of 28, you get a 26. But the problem is that I wouldn't change that much, because if you rotate your carousel had been rotated in a way when those two cassettes were not reciprocating with the driver funnel, the driver will still get stuck. So on that aspect, and if you understand what I'm going, the T80, if it's reproduced, needs to actually not have the same carousel design. So basically, the MZ, the autoloader from the T64, needs to be dropped. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. First of all, it presents a higher target on the hull itself, but also because it's like that, it reduces the volume available in the hull and in the turret. On top of it, as I said, it has a hybrid system, so electrical and fluid-based drive for the turret, which means that if anything penetrates and hit the almost 2.1 liter fluid reservoir in the tank, that shit's gonna barbecue your ass, and it burns far faster than even the gasoline that you're gonna use for the tank. Which means that actually, what is needed if the T80 is starting is the engine can be kept, because actually, and that's unfortunate to say, that engine gives you a lot more power, and it also can be used for other stuff. It can be used as a turbine for multiple usages. It's not just for the tank. Of course, it's going to use more fuel, but the things that need to be changed in the tanks, first of all, as I said already, the hull needs to be enlarged for the application of the T72, T90 style autoloader. This would free a lot more place in the tank. The turret needs to be, unfortunately, given a bustle, although the bustle hasn't been very much a panacea for secondary explosions. It has been allowing the crew to have less ammunition within their reach, but at the same time, some T90Ms have been lost because of the bustle. The bustle will actually deflagrate, not destroy the turret at all, but damage the engine deck, which basically means that your tank is still lost. You have a mobility kill, it's true, but your tank is lost. Your crew, instead of trying to, once again, leave your tank properly, they would leave the tank because it's a fire, hatch is open. Not today, but tomorrow, but in a week, Ukraine is going to send a small DJI drone with a grenade in the toss. A Kobe T19M lost, despite the fact that the bustle did not damage the tank. The explosion from the bustle did not damage the tank. So this is exactly what I'm getting with this. If the production is going to be restarted the same way, which is that what they said, so they're going to reproduce the T80s on its R Object 219R version, which is going to be the T80B version.
I don't hear you.